All right, hello and welcome to In the Paceline. My name is Chris Barr. I'll be your host today. And today I have two guests with me.
Hi, I'm Wei.
I'm Carissa.
The three of us are Bay Area cyclists who love to ride our bikes, love to race our bikes, and are passionate about the sport. And today we're going to be talking about a couple of things. Wei, why don't you go over some of the topics that we're going to cover?
Yeah, so the NCL is a new race series that's happening next year, and it promises to bring a lot more spectators to the sport, to elevate the sport to the likeness of something like the NFL, where a lot of people will get really stoked on it, will watch, and just enjoy cycling. And this topic has a lot of interest to us because, as Chris says, we love the sport. We want to see it grow, and we just want to go over what the NCL is and just kind of be able to talk about what our thoughts are on it.
Right. And as well, we're going to discuss, is it for the fans? Is it for the racers? Is it right for the fans? Is it right for the racers? And then, what else are we going to cover today, Carissa?
Should we go over what NCL
Yeah,
has
let's talk
promised?
about it. Let's talk about it. Yeah. They've announced their plans. It's a little nebulous. It seems like they're doing it a little nebulous on purpose. You go into their website and it's a little shrouded in mystery. Mm-hmm. They have phrases like, we're shifting gears. And it's like, okay. So it took I spent some time on the website and it took some decoding to figure out what's going on here. So here's what we do know. We do know that there's 4 races in the first year. We know that there's $1 million up for grabs. Mm-hmm. Big one that I want to point out is there is equal equity between the men and the women's teams due to the way that they've structured the races. Mm-hmm. So the women's teams and the men's teams score points toward a unified pot for the championship. So you can't have one side be really good and the other be not so great and expect to be able to win this thing. You have to have 2 very solid teams both on the men's side and on the women's side, which I think is a shining example of how much they care about equity in the sport. Mm-hmm. What else? There's teams of 8, 6. So the men and the women race separate. Mm-hmm. They're not going to be racing together. They're going to race in their own race. And in the men's race and in the women's race, each team will have 6 riders with 2 alternates. Mm-hmm. So that means if you're a complete team with a men's side and a women's side, you'll have 16 riders on your team. Mm-hmm. What else?
They're changing the format of the race as well. So it's not a traditional crit where first person across the line at the end wins. Instead, they're kind of copying a point-a-lap race almost, like a track race format where every single lap there's points to be had. And also, it's not a rider that wins, it's a team. So cumulatively, each rider earns points for their team instead of earns points for themselves. So the end of the day, when the race is over, a team will win instead of just a single person that represents a team, which could change the format quite a bit and maybe change the style of racing and the way that teams will race and work together. But it seems that the NCL hopes that this will make the racing more exciting, where instead of having a sprinter sit in the whole race, just a sprint at the end, every lap will be a sprint, and it'll keep the racing more dynamic, and that's another big departure.
Yeah, and they're also bringing in a virtual component of the races. So if you're not a racer actively participating in the race, you can simultaneously see racers heart rate, power, speed data through, I don't know, is it a live stream or a metaverse kind of thing?
I think details to come. We don't know that yet, and I mean, by the time that this is actually out there on the internet, maybe we will know more. But as of right now, they're not really giving up too many details on okay, this is the platform we're going with. Mm-hmm. Same thing with TV streaming. A little bit, it's under the radar. They're oh, we're partnering with someone. I did see, and I don't know if this is tied back, that Netflix is finally starting to get serious about sports and live sports. Mm. And on their bullet list of things they're interested was cycling.
Really?
Oh.
Yeah.
That's news to me.
Yeah.
Is it for the European, like...
Maybe it's
European
European.
ones?
Maybe it's the NCL partnering with Netflix.
Interesting.
Maybe.
That would be
That'd
pretty
be
big.
pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah, there is a lot of, like, ties to, like, tech. Like, when they're, like, on the list of, like, executives or people that are behind it, I think there's a lot of people that were related to certain tech companies, so...
Yeah.
And the way they presented it also seems like a startup kind of presenting their company as well. So who knows? Maybe there is some ties to Netflix. We could hope. That would be
A
amazing.
Silicon Valley series.
Well, there's gonna be the documentary series about the league
Yeah.
after the fact.
Like just like F1.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we've got that coming out for the Tour de France next year
Yeah.
already. I think with the right personalities in crit racing and the right drama, right, it could work for crit as well, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, like Legion was already doing a bunch of documentaries with Rafa, so I can see them trying to go and then document the whole series. But that's for like the after the races.
Right. Because yeah, it's kind of tough if you're not like we are the perfect fan for the NCL. If you think about it, we love cycling. We're passionate about the sport. We race in these races now on an amateur level. Obviously, we don't get paid, but we enjoy it. So we are the weekend warrior that is probably like the most interested in this thing.
Yeah.
We're like the perfect person that to get captured by this. But there's like a much larger piece of the pie out there called the general public. Like,
Yeah.
is this gonna be able to capture their hearts and minds, and are the characters there to help them connect,
Yeah.
even though they don't ride a bike all the time?
Yeah. Well, I guess taking a step back, what are you guys thinking, or what are you guys' thoughts on why cycling isn't bigger in, I guess specifically the United States? Like, what's the barrier to entry to people enjoying bike racing? And then I guess from there we could go to talk about if the NCL solves those issues. So I guess off the top of my head, I think maybe just like compared to Europe, cycling just isn't as big of a part of our culture anymore. Most people might have a negative connotation of cycling. They think about when they're driving how a cyclist is just in their way and slows down their commute or something. And then I could also see that a lot of times the race formats are just a little bit more, or it's a little bit hard to understand what's going on. Like if you take like the Tour de France, for example, like the tactics isn't so obvious a lot of the times. Like maybe people don't understand a concept such as like drafting. So, or like, one rider working for another, or there's all those different jerseys that mean something different. And it's just kind of a high barrier to entry of all these specific things to know. I could see that as being another barrier. And then a typical road race, most of the race probably isn't that exciting. It's just kind of like a big group of people riding together, and there's just a few key moments where things happen, where big changes are made in the race. What else are you guys thoughts on this, like of barriers to entries to cycling?
I'll let you go, Chris.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I mean, I'm pretty new to the sport, to racing as well. So, and then to take a step back, I feel like it's not fundamentally the difference between like Americans and Europeans, because there's at some point in America, cycling was a thing. There were all those like road racing series, like Tour of California. And I mean, I can't even name most of the series because I wasn't like paying a lot of attention. But I guess my point is like, at some point, cycling was pretty big, or people were willing to put on races in the continental America, and then it stopped becoming a thing because all the racers kind of ended up going to Europe to race UCI road races. So I guess it's not really like an answer, but it's more like, I wonder what happened. Is it like the funding? Maybe it's just like infrastructure that's not supportive enough of the race, that because so much of our culture is emphasizing on like football and baseball and like basketball, that maybe I don't know, behind some executives, they're just like, okay, we're gonna put less funding in cycling. So maybe it's not really like the fans' preferences, but also how the infrastructure didn't support it enough that, because like, you know, cycling like crit, it's like NASCAR. It's pretty exciting, and then you can say the same thing about like Formula One. Like people might not understand the rules. They might not understand different different like teams, and it's just cars going around the racetrack, right? So, but you like it, which is also not that popular in America compared to other countries in Europe or even Asia. So, yeah, I wonder. Maybe it's kind of like how the sports are being advocated by the organizers and how much media exposure, how much financial support there is.
Yeah. Well, I see F1 as a great proxy to crit racing and bicycle racing because it has many of the same problems as we have in the sport, right? You've got complex tactics that are not super visible to the naked eye. You've got the rules aren't as bad in F1. The rules are crazy in F1. So the sport, like at a fundamental level, crit racing is simpler than F1. But on the surface, it seems almost the same, right? And you actually have to dive deeper into the sport, and there's a barrier to entry to even understanding, like all these various complex things that happen that if you're just flip on your TV, like it's just like, oh, there's a guy with a helmet on in a car going around a circuit, and it's the same thing for a cyclist. It's like, oh, there's a bunch of people in spandex with glasses and a helmet on going around. Like, I have no way of identifying.
Which is how I feel about baseball, by the way.
Okay.
I'm like, why am I here for 3 hours, like looking at people like running around the court and throwing things? I do not understand.
Right, and baseball has overcome that by just being like really cheap to go to, and there's food. Like, and you just go with your friends. It's like oh, like something's going on over there. But like my main attraction is I'm sitting here in the stands with friends. I'm eating a hot dog, and having a good time. For many people, I mean, of course, there's other people that maybe are sitting right behind or in front of you that are very interested in the third pitch that's happening in the 6th inning. You know, with this pitcher versus this batter, and it's a big deal, right?
Maybe Americans just really like a stadium sport. You know, a place to sit with food and just chill.
Is that what cycling needs? Like if cycling
seats.
If crit racing happened in the baseball stadium, right? Like if they took and they put a crit course down there, would people show up?
Maybe. Do people show up at velodromes? Guess the velodromes typically don't have hot dogs and beer like being sold. At least not here.
Yeah, they're also indoor.
But hey, I can see velodrome being like a great entry point though to bring more people into the sport or watching.
Yeah, it literally is like NASCAR.
A venue that, you know.
Yeah.
Food for thought.
Yeah.
Not pun intended.
Well, either way, the NCL's goal is to really kind of break through a bunch of these barriers that we're talking about.
Yeah.
Are they going to do it? Like, they're placing some fair amount of emphasis on bringing over teams from Europe, right? And they're dangling $1 million, and they're dangling the potential for exposure, and is a European team going to bring over 16 riders 4 times to these various American cities and have them race in, let's be honest, high-risk racing? It's probably more risky than a road race, right? Like,
totally. Yeah, I think that's actually that's going to be a big challenge. Or I hear it is a big challenge for the NCL. Just finding racers, because I think on the road racing calendar, there's races that these pro teams in Europe that they have to go to. Whether it's the classics or the grand tours, or there's all these races that are steeped in history and tradition, and just throw in like a crit race that these teams in Europe, like you said, have to go to 4 times. That's a lot of logistics that go into that, and a lot of money just to travel for it, for a race that they might just not take as seriously. Maybe they think it's a little gimmicky. It's hard for them to have buy-in to it, and I think it's just a lot of commitment. From what I hear, that the NCL wants to have a lot of commitment from the riders or like from the teams. Like they say that they want them to go to all 4 races, which is 4 times in the year that they would have to travel. So
I think it's a requirement.
Yeah.
Like
So-
you can't join the NCL without saying you will be there for all the races currently.
yeah,
I believe.
I have a friend that he's a very fast racer and runs the team at my office, but he says that he got an email from the NCL to try to convince them to get a team to go or just to offer the spot to them. But he says that he couldn't do it because he can't commit to 4 weekends that are off next year because he just doesn't know what he's going to do. And he's not a professional bike racer. He still has a day job and just can't plan to that extent. So it seems like they already are struggling on that front a lot where they're just asking other domestic elite teams throughout the country to join.
Yep.
And
Yeah, I guess that's one of the things that I worry that this race might be kind of a fluff because they're still struggling to get people together. And it's very much like a race that they're trying to build at a high caliber. But if like the high caliber teams are not showing up and it's just like a few teams who maybe thought the prize money was good and happened to be free, or some composite team got put together and joined the race, then the competition like isn't really there, and then the whole thing just kind of is a false promise, right? Because I think they were probably hoping to have like the best teams in the U.S. and maybe a couple teams from the Europe to like get together. But if everybody sort of like is banking on other teams' commitment, also like I don't know about European schedule, but at least in America, most of the pro teams, they have a pretty set schedule that's structured around American Crit Cup, ACC. So that's like throughout the year, and it's about like, I would say maybe like once a month since like starting from summer. So there's like, you know, like all those like what the Tulsa one, for example, like Birmingham. So they already have a pretty set schedule going on that they're working towards to get the ACC championship. So now if they're adding another responsibility to go to NCL, that's a lot of planning for the race director. That's a lot of like time commitment for the racers. And it's just a lot of like pick and choose because, you know, because a series, you kind of have to compete in all of those races within the series. And same with ACC. If you miss one, it's like your team is not going to score. So
But $1 million is a lot of, like, if I'm choosing between NCL and ACC, I don't know what the prize payouts are for ACC. But if I'm choosing between the two, I gotta imagine the $1 million prize pool that they're working with has to be, like, it's way larger than, because, like, the truth is, even our pro teams in America, a lot of those guys on those teams have jobs, right? Like, I mean, you've got, like Legion, the people, like, the Williams brothers who put Legion together do it full time, right? But, and like, there's a handful of other racers that like are able to live their life in such a way that they don't have to worry about anything but cycling. But I think on the average, like,
yeah, it's super rare.
yeah,
Yeah.
most of the guys even out there in the P12 field that we see at like a Crit Cup, you know, racing under the lights at Tulsa, right? How many? Most of those guys have to have jobs.
No, totally.
Like,
bike shop job, but sure.
At least half of them, I'd say, like have full-time jobs, and cycling's just their passion, and they just make time for it. You know?
and if it could be a career, they may make that decision, right? Like if the money was there and the support was there, and like they could, I'm sure many of them, if someone came up to them and offered them a contract with a salary that was subsequent to what they're making now, where they could drop out of their work and just focus, I'm sure many of them would do it.
It's not really doesn't really happen in the States that often.
Yeah. But on the other hand, I also feel like this whole, let's say, recruiting process isn't very like transparent from their website. I mean, I'm not a race director, right? But it's like, even if I'm a race director from their website, it's really hard to gather what kind of information that's needed to, say, apply to join the league and do the races. And also, because it's such an early stage race, I don't know who else is competing, and I don't know if I want to put that kind of commitment and energy into it. So I don't know. It's just kind of like a
It's like a bit of a chicken and egg issue, right?
yeah.
Where it's like,
but like
our team won't join until we see that it's worth it. And it's like, well, it's only
like,
worth joining if 4 teams decide like we're gonna do at least 4 or 5.
It's like deciding which party to go to.
Yeah.
No.
Want to go to the cool party?
Yeah.
Where all the cool kids are.
I mean, at least the NCL's party has $1 million.
I guess
So far, I haven't heard any like commitment. Like I've been talking sort of like off the table with some people who I know in the pro cycling scene, and nobody was like, "Yes, I'm going to NCL next year." You know, like.
Yeah, it seems like most people I've talked to, it's like they're stoked that it's happening.
Yep.
They're hopeful that it will do something good for the sport, but there's still a slight skepticism like surrounding it. You know, it's like a detached hopefulness, but they're not totally bought in. Like, and probably for many of the reasons they can't commit to that many races all over the country.
It's only 4.
And
come on, Tour of Dairyland has how many races in
But
a
it's
row?
happened in,
7 to 8.
And I
It's
guess
happened together though.
the people
in the
that
same week.
yeah, I guess that's true. But it's like 4 separate travel dates that are all around the country. You know, it's
Right.
Miami, DC, and then
And also
Denver
just
and
Atlanta,
is that right?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I don't have all 4 of them off the top of my head.
DC and Miami,
DC, Miami,
Atlanta,
and Colorado. No, that's
Denver?
what I wanted them to have one in Colorado, but
Not
they don't
Denver.
have one.
okay.
I want to say it
Something.
was.
That was one of the places that I felt like it was either if they should add something to the calendar, like Denver or New York would be
Oh,
like the right next venue.
yeah.
I think San Francisco would be cool.
But well, it's. I think it's good that we're talking about venue, because we recently heard about them talk about their vision for the one in Florida,
Yeah.
right? And it's a little different. Like, it seems like they might, like from an exposure standpoint, they might have it seems like they have the right recipe, right? Because a lot of our races that we do here in NorCal, they take place on like purposefully empty roads that the city is willing to close for a day.
Yeah.
And the only people who find this thing are people who live in the area or joggers who run across it and go, what's going on here today?
Yeah.
And like, oh, there's a bike race. You should come hang out and watch it. And some of them are stoked on it, and some of them are really mad that they can't get to their house.
Yeah.
Now, what is that going to, like, they're going to do something in Miami, Florida over spring break. Do we think it's going to be exactly what the sport needs? Or is it going to also provide some issues? Like, what's the thoughts?
It sounds like the hope is that it'll just have a lot more exposure in a positive way. Like, oh, there's this big event going on. It's exciting, and you stumble upon it, and you'll be stoked on it. But I kind of question that a little bit. You know, if I'm partying in Miami for spring break, I think I'm just going to see it as a nuisance, you know? It's like, I can't cross the street as easily, or I'll get yelled at if I just stumble on the street or something. And it just kind of is in the way. And I think a lot of it also has to do with the pre-existing kind of feelings towards bikes. And I think the average person these days might not be so stoked on just a bunch of bikes taking up the streets, being closed down. But that's my personal take. So I kind of question if their strategy will work, at least specifically for the Miami one.
What do you think, Carissa? Miami, is it the right spot? Are people going to be vibing? Does it depend on how they execute?
I mean, I'm all about racing in big city in the city streets. I've been to a few big races in like downtown.
Drop them. Which ones have you done? Help us out.
I mean, I don't know, like Tulsa.
Oh, yeah, there we go. Come on.
St. Louis.
Okay, yeah.
Milwaukee.
Yeah, so you talked about how you're new to racing, but you've done some of these, like, at least for what we have, like bigger races.
Yeah.
So getting your perspective, yeah, like, what do you think?
I mean, let's say Tulsa, day 2, day 3, Crybaby Hill, right? This is like one of the most exciting races in Tulsa Tough, but also the whole series, right? Like everyone knows about it, everyone like thinks about it, and then even when you think about Tulsa, you're like, oh, isn't it a biking city? No. Like, nobody thinks about it that way. But, like, when you actually got there, everyone's, like, excited to talk about it. It was like, yeah, you're going to Tulsa Tough. It's, like, Crybaby Hill. It's a big party. It's kind of like, you know, Beta Breakers in San Francisco. You don't have to run, but you're like, yeah, Beta Breakers. I'm going to show up. I might wear a costume. So when I was at Crybaby Hill racing that day, it was kind of like that. And then we were, I don't know, it's kind of like I don't know what the area is, like a neighborhood, but there's a lot of college, like frat house looking buildings, frat houses, like along the courses. So later in the day when the pros were racing, like it was really hot, like 105 degree, and just people just came out of nowhere. They just like, it's a Sunday, right? First of all, you have nothing to do after in the afternoon, and you just show up. It's super hot. You show up in swimsuit. You show up in like costumes, whatever. And people were doing, like, the racers were doing the bike races, right? They're working hard. They're climbing, but they were like just frat houses. They were like, you know, playing beer pong. They have this like pool set up in front of their houses. Every time the racers came by, they just like either gave them the hand up or like, you know, cheers. So they were like,
here's
you know,
a beer.
Hand ups in a,
Beer hand ups in the crit.
they were spraying water on them with their hoses.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, I don't think they were there to kind of like actively see, oh, who's winning or like what their strategies are, but they're definitely like participating in the sport, and they're like excited that it's happening, which may or may not have fueled their party themselves, right? It's like, I don't know, it's just like this like symbiosis going on, this like this racing make their party better, and their party is kind of like something to like watch while you're having this party. I don't know how to explain it, but
the cohesion of vibes.
Yeah, so, but like, I guess to my point, it's like, because it happens in like in a city with more younger people, and it's not that hard to get to. It's, you know, everyone, I mean, Tulsa is a small city arguably, but on a Sunday when there's nothing happening, everyone kind of just gather. They're, you know, they all like gather in this part of the town that is where the bike racing, Crybaby Hill, is happening. So definitely have some sort of like, I don't know, like magnetize people, attracts everyone.
Right. So it's gonna need, so the venues are gonna need food, frat houses maybe,
beer pong,
and like, I mean, it's Miami, Florida, so you gotta think they're gonna be like doing music. Like if you did a concert venue next to it or something.
Pitbull
like
show up.
Pitbull, yeah. So like, yeah, Pitbull is on before the pro race, right? And it's like, well, I'll go check out this concert, because, yeah, like it's like they're associating lifestyle things with the sport at that point. It's like, I guess that's a little bit more like articulate. It's like, I like music and I enjoy music and I enjoy the excitement of music and I enjoy this thing. And now if I marry this thing that I am familiar with bike racing, which I'm not familiar with, I'm like maybe a little more open.
Yeah, I guess it's, if you think of like the Super Bowl,
yeah,
there's all these other things, like, you know, people watch the Super Bowl sometimes just for the commercials, like, and it's just kind of, that's its own like thing. And then the halftime show, there's like a musical performance, and I guess overall it's like, you don't have to be super into football to enjoy the Super Bowl, because people just kind of gather around that and just hang out surrounding that, even though they don't necessarily understand football. Like, I'm not a football fan, but I've enjoyed Super Bowl parties.
Right.
So, yeah, it's in a similar sense. I totally see what you're saying.
All right, well, we discussed the fans a lot. What if we talk about the racers?
Yeah. One thought that I had on that I think pertains to me a lot is just like, all this stuff is done for the fan, trying to make it interesting for spectators. But it seems like there's maybe not a lot of focus on just the actual bike racers. Like there's some stuff like the inclusivity, like each team has to have an equal like women's squad, which is great. And the teams scored with both squads like kind of weighted equally. The payout is the same. So that's good, but they want to keep it at a very high level, and I wonder if there if there's space for more inclusion of like amateur racers to also join in on the NCL, where it's like maybe in their events there could be category like 3, 4, 5 races thrown in there along with the actual like main event. Like I remember at Into the Lion's Den like a year and some change ago.
Yeah.
There was like an amateur race as well as like the main invitational event, and I wonder if there'd be space for that in the NCL, and then weekend warriors like myself could also join in on the fun.
You gonna fly to Miami?
I've talked about that with a friend. We wanted to go do a crit or two in Miami. It's like a vacation where we also went and raced bikes.
It's like Manhattan Beach last year.
Yeah. Well, so that was my downgrade because the flights to Miami were over $1,000. I was originally planning to go to Miami with a friend, and we were gonna go and race in Miami and try to show those thick crit boys down there how fast we are in California. But at $1,000 a ticket, we were like, well, we're not doing that. So, yeah, like that type of thing does appeal to me. Like I would, as an amateur, if I got like a lottery spot for a Cat 3 race, let's say, to race an hour or two before the pros, right? Mm-hmm. I would totally do that. Like maybe it's my big thing for the year, right? Like I'm gonna fly to Miami. I'm gonna take this race seriously as a Cat 3, Cat 4, whatever, amateur, and have a great time and make it like my big trip. Mm-hmm. If you obviously there's like you have to be able to afford it, and that ties right back into our whole like inclusivity and barriers to entry. Like not everyone has $2,000 to spend on flights, as well as like your entry fee, as well as your stay there. Mm-hmm. Like it's not gonna be super easy. Like it's not accessible for everyone, but at least you can get amateurs to come out and get excited, and maybe like they can go and see their heroes racing, and then they can envision themselves as a pro, and then they can go and work toward that goal. Because it's really all about starting people young or like early on in their careers and convincing them that it's worth putting the energy into to like go for this, right? Because we don't have a lot of pro racers in America, and like we have like a handful of really talented Americans. They immediately get scooped to Europe, like gone, like boof. Yeah, like because there's.
Then they're scooped back to Legion.
What?
They're scooped back.
Oh yeah,
to America
yeah.
by Legion.
Yeah. Well, if they're done in Europe, they're like, oh yeah, they come back. What it looks like, which is exciting too. I think that's also a good.
Or they get into gravel.
Every retired pro's dream: race gravel. Yeah. Maybe.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on this topic, Chris? Like kind of the focusing on fans versus the racer aspect, in terms of with respect to growing the sport.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's like growing a like loyal fan base is definitely important. Having people excited about the sport, and then, which I guess they're kind of like they're like interconnected, right? Like if people are excited about the sport, they will try it out themselves. They will send their kids to do things at a young age, and maybe that will kind of like grow the racer base down in the line as well. But for now, I feel like Chris was mentioning, they're not like that many like pro racers or crit racers. Like you kind of see the similar faces like at every race. It is just not a sport that's been like growing like baseball, basketball, football, that everybody's like breaking their head trying to get into from like a very young age, doing collegiate, trying to like get scooped up by like the professional teams. But that's for a different topic. That's for a different like infrastructure stuff. But
we could
in
do
terms
a whole
of
show
this
on that
race,
easily.
Yeah. But in terms of this race, I guess like we so far talked a lot about like how they are trying to make this interesting for the fans. Exciting format, like tons of money in the prize, and then like the coverage, and also in terms of like doing the whole metaverse thing, like trying to get people like interested. But I haven't seen that many promises to kind of like the racers. So in terms of like, oh, we're gonna implement certain safety infrastructure to the races, because that's one of the things that I've heard a lot of like professional races were like complaining about, even in the ACC races. Like there was like, oh, we're racing in the dark, but there are not enough lights when we're racing like and after hours, or the barriers were like what crashes. Like there were so many crashes that happened in the crit races last year, which is
I mean at San Rafael, like they had barriers where it like jutted out suddenly on the downhill.
yeah, like
And then
why?
yeah, a friend of mine got messed up when he went down.
Yeah, well, we've all seen those like gates that are like the meat grinder style, where they're like not full, but like not a full piece of barrier at all, and like you can actually fly into them and like get caught in them, right? Or they have the steel feet.
Yep.
And no, like they have put forward on their website that like safety is a big concern, but they also haven't gone into detail on what that means yet.
Yeah.
Like, are they gonna put a new
Exact
barrier out there,
measures.
like a plastic barrier or something that?
They say they partner with Safe Sport, but what's that?
Like a doping, anti-doping.
Safe Sport is as I understand it, and I might be wrong, but Safe Sport is basically a safe body for you to report things if they happen. So like if there's any misconduct amongst a coach, an official, a teammate, or something like that, it's a neutral space where you can safely go and explain what has happened, and then a investigation will then happen, or like get kicked off to help figure out what is going on, and then advocate for you if something did happen. I believe that's what Safe Sport is. They're also going to be doing doping testing as well in the NCL. So.
But yeah, Safe Sport has nothing to do with the physical.
I see.
Right, yeah.
Protection.
I don't think Safe Sport's going to be like, here's the barrier we're going to use. That's different than the meat grinders that we set out on at all these big ones like Tulsa, or even locally we find them sometimes.
I mean, it sounds so trivial, but it's like a big deterrent in terms of whether team wants to sign up for new kinds of race. Because it's like, why would you volunteer people to like crash and then like suicide themselves, right, quote unquote?
$1 million.
Yeah, but it's
Not worth it.
I don't know. I think if they made safety like a very top thing, and they're like, here's the cool barriers we're going to use, and here's how much safer it's going to be, you actually might, like, it might be like that little bit to like convince a European team that has someone who's like, you know, they have serious aspirations for like one-day classics or something like that. Because like, yes, it's a series, but they're kind of like one-day races because they're so spread out.
Yeah.
It's like, you're going to probably bring your one-day racers, maybe, if you're from Europe. And if you can convince them that it's safer, maybe they're willing to do it.
Yeah. And also the transparency thing I was talking about, like, you know, what to expect in this race. How am I getting like paid out? And then maybe this is like in a contract or something. But so far it feels like pretty ambiguous, like at least not clear enough to convince a team to sign up for a new like race series. But obviously I think team directors are probably like curious about it, interested in like kind of like put their tap into the water a little bit, but like right now I feel like a lot of the focus is on growing the fans for sure. But we haven't like really addressed like the fundamental racer experience, which I think is one of the reasons that crit racing isn't growing as fast as like other sports. It just feels like a very unsafe experience that's not... Yeah, it feels like an unsafe experience. I would say that.
So aside from barriers, what do you think we can do to make it safer? Does the sport need overhaul? Like, and we need to just become okay with protective gear? Like, back in the day, like, way early 90s, downhill racers actually only raced in spandex. Because it, like, wasn't cool to wear any protective equipment. Like, a full-face helmet was, like, maybe what you wore with your Lycra. Doing downhill. And it was always like, well, you know, like, we don't want to have all that bulky equipment on, it'll make us slower, blah, blah, blah. And then a couple of riders came along and said, I don't care, I'm wearing all this equipment. And then they won the championship even wearing it, even though no one else did. And they were safer, and they were able to get up from crashes. And now it's, like, totally standard. Nobody would race without these things in downhill. Do you think like there's been talk of like full face helmets for road racing?
Really?
No.
Yeah. Like,
I don't know how I feel about that.
I mean, what are we gonna do to make the sport safer? Because like we're racing naked on our bikes at 40 miles an hour. Like
Like, I don't know, like, pick a road that's not, like, so bumpy, right? Pick a road that's, like, pave the road before you're gonna race it or something. Like, it's not a gravel race.
Yeah, I don't
And
know.
then control the pedestrians. There were, like, a pedestrian coming out onto the course in Tulsa, and, he passed away. So, like, doing a better job at marshalling the course.
he got hit and
Yeah.
I don't know. I think I'm kind of of the opinion. It just, you just have to be kind of prudent about those things. Good marshaling, sweeping the course well, and then making sure that the barriers are just the right type that are safer, making sure they're set up properly. I think if those, for me personally, usually I don't think of safety as too high of a priority personally, but I think like
you're just like
that's like, that should be standard, and that should be done to a high level of excellence.
Okay.
But I think there is inherent risk to the sport that it's always going to be there. You're racing really close to people, and that's not really going to change. And then it just is a matter of, I feel like it's maybe just a cultural thing of like how people race, if they're willing to get too aggressive or not. But that's maybe somewhat out of the hands of like the race organizers.
I mean, you could make like heftier penalties for racing in ways that are deemed unsafe. Potentially that make people feel like, oh, I'm not going to dive bomb this corner, and potentially take out 3 people.
Actually, I could see that. That's a good point. Yeah, I think penalties for like, I guess, riding unsafe. Like, so if marshals are also like referees in a way, and people could get yellow flags.
You get a foul.
Or, for dive bombing a corner, or for, I don't know, slamming on the brakes too hard, or sprinting not in a straight line.
I see the controversy in the Peloton videos coming out by the dozen. As like, this team handed a yellow flag like on 2 laps to go because of a close pass. Like, oh, it would get interesting. It would get interesting.
The refs would get so much heat. There's already like struggles just to have a person there marshalling in general, and suddenly it has to be a skilled person that can make those calls. Like,
right.
That would be challenging, but for a local race at least, that's usually what I think in terms of. But perhaps for something that's much bigger, more produced, maybe the NCL could make that happen, and that could be another kind of way they try to innovate racing. Along with the other things that they're doing.
Right.
And I could see that maybe having a positive benefit in some ways. Like I've last year at the Giro de SF, my friend, like he was sprinting, like was gonna win, and then someone like sprinted into him, and they both went down. And there's an amazing video in Crit Drama of his bike tumbling and stuff.
Oh no!
I think apparently his bike still got third, but the officials didn't.
They didn't
count that. No.
Is it your body or your bike? What has to get across?
Bike, I think.
I don't know.
It's just the bike.
Because you can push the wheel when you at the
oh
finish
right,
line.
right.
But anyway, I think in the end he didn't get third, and he was just really, really upset because he felt that person should have been penalized for riding in an unsafe manner. But in the end, when he went to the officials to kind of, say that he wanted them to do something, they couldn't do anything because there's no one specifically watching for those kinds of things. And I guess there's also just no standard protocol for that,
Interesting.
That sucks.
Yeah, I do know. I have seen them relegate riders. We had a guy on our team relegated for for something he did in the race, and he got like first in the race, and they relegated him to third.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Didn't disqualify them.
Yeah, I again weird. Like he did something deemed unsafe, and then somehow they like. I don't know if he deviated in the sprint or what, like deviated line, but they handed a relegation to him in an amateur race.
Interesting.
Which we don't see that often.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess this back to the safety point. It's more like what's outside of like the racer's control. Like I agree, it's inherently a risky sport. It has its own danger. We're not trying to just like race safe in a way that we're not going to do anything risky. We protect ourselves. But say like if someone did something unsafe and then push you to the corner and you're like literally going 35 mile per hour above this like steel barrier feed that's sticking out, and then you had to trip and then fall on the barrier, that's something that could be prevented.
Totally.
If you use a different kind of barrier.
Right.
Anyways.
NCL.
Yeah. So let's wrap it up. We went over what the NCL is. We gave our thoughts as fans of the sport. We're the target fan for this thing, at least to start. We're people who like to ride our bikes. We gave our thoughts on a myriad of issues: safety, the structure. Is it gonna work? I'm hopeful. It's gonna work. I want it to work. I want our sport to grow. I want to have more races every calendar year to do and see more new people in there. Mm-hmm. What else did we cover? Fans versus racers. Is it?
Yeah.
What's the right thing to What's the right thing to focus on?
Yeah, we talked about safety.
Yeah.
And whether or not they're
interconnected. When you have more fans, you'll have more racers. And when you have more racers who do this, you'll bring more friends to watch them, and then more brands.
Okay. And then we ranted about random shit in our own area selfishly, which I think was great.
Yeah.
And I loved. So, hope you enjoyed it. Yay! Thank you guys for coming today.
Peace out.
Yeah, thanks for having
Appreciate
us.
Thanks for having us.
Sitting down. And now I get to go and probably edit this for a week. It's going to be freaking terrible. But,
amazing.
yeah, see you next time on In the Paceline. Ciao.
Like, comment,
Paceline.
subscribe.
Oh, yeah.
Tell us your thoughts
Smash
in the
that
comments
like
below.
Hit the like button.
Here's my handle.
Yeah. Oh,
Follow
yeah.
me.
we can put your Instagrams in there for
Oh,
sure if you
yeah,
want,
no.
so that your followings grow. Which, like, we're gonna. I mean, who knows how many people are gonna view this? Like, all of up to 1,000. So it could be really big.
Once it gets to 1,000, you take down the video, right?
Oh well, paywall. All right. Cool. Until next time. Get out there and ride. Have fun. Bye.
ASMR, just eating pastries.
Oh, that's gross, probably.